one story, there's a girl in our group that a year ago, like she's in a messy divorce. She's American. She can't leave the country or she forfeits custody of her kid, and she's part of our community. And so a year ago, she was like barely kind of making it day to day. And we've seen over the last year, we've seen God take her from that point to the point where now she and another mom from our group have their kids go to the same preschool. And so they're saying, let's make friends with the other moms. Let's take them out to coffee when we drop our kids off at school. And let's love on them. And now she's thinking, how can I bless other people in the same situation that I was in? And so when I see that, I see God at work. And so that's what we're about, you know. And there's another couple we met. We kind of knew them, and we were walking on the beach. We run into these guys, and we just walk up behind them, and we're awkward, you know, and we like kind of tap them on the shoulder. And the girl's crying, and it turns out they're in like the roughest fight of their marriage. And so, but being awkward, we don't just walk on, you know. We're like, hey, you want some ice cream? And so we so we ended up spending a few hours with them, and you know, we told them, like, we're not counselors, but I have hope for your marriage and you don't, and we'll talk. We'll help you walk through this. And so over the last few months, ourselves and others, and they're part of our church community now, and their marriage is healing. Marriages don't heal overnight. In case you've bought the lie that TV preachers tell you sometime, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, even if God does something amazing. And so, but they're healing. They're on the path, and their marriage could have broken up that night. I mean, they were talking about that. So I just want to encourage you, like, those are some of the things we've seen God do in Northern Ireland. Those are some of the things that He's done through your prayers and support. And those are the things that He can do here through your awkwardness. Like just bringing what you have to the table, not running away from people's mess. Like He works healing. And we've seen it in Northern Ireland, and thank you for supporting us. Like, we love you guys. It's really good to be back with you. And that's all I got to say. We'd love to go out to lunch with anybody afterwards that would like to hear more. Puerto Vallarta, man, we've been missing that. They don't have good Mexican food.
Thank you, Mark. I want to say that Mark and Angie are going to stay around at the end of the service. And last week they were at Exit 59, and God did some amazing instant healing as Mark and Ange prayed for one of the photographers that broke his ankle. Thank you. And so God showed up in great power and heat, and they were instantly healed and recognized it. And as these guys prayed for them, God finished it up. And it was a sign, I believe, to that church to be like the Lord wanted them to be. And I just want to set up today's teaching by saying I think God's up to that today. I really think that He wants to do that. And positionally, I may not be ready to do a lot more than I'm going to do today, but Mark and Ange are going to be available to pray, and so they'll be up front here if you want prayer. There are ways that God intervenes, and sometimes it is like instantaneously, and sometimes it's not. So they're going to be available listening to God to hear and stand in the gap for you at the end of the service. Can we do that? And then you can go out to dinner.
Sure, man. That's great.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Well, good. I'm here. I think it's somewhat of a miracle. Thank you. Thank you. I have been getting funny cards. And they're handmade cards, which are really the best kind. This is from Avery Clark. Is she in Children's Church? I assume she is. I think she's obviously pre-teen. I don't know. I'm not an artist, but this is the card that she made for me. And her family took me on and said, we want to teach our family to pray, and this is a good time because you really need prayer. And this is a little girl named Avery Clark, who is, Aaron and Maria's little girl. And she said, I had a big people dream last night, Mom and Dad. She said, I dreamt that Guy was in a motorcycle wreck, but the angel was there before he wrecked, and he put this collar on Guy to protect him. And then once he was better, the angel took it off, and I was okay. And so I feel like, out of the mouth of babes, I can learn a little bit about what God might be up to with me. I don't know. I'm glad to be spared. I'm glad to be here today. And I asked God, I said, God, do you want to show me something? Do you want to teach me something through a little one? I certainly want to be humble enough, like a little one, to learn from you. And so I wanted to give myself to the Lord in some new way that he might want to teach me a little bit about myself and some of my self-centeredness. And so he put this little collar on me. You like this? And so I have broken shoulders and ribs and neck. And so I have disintegrated cheekbones and all kinds of fun, painful things. And I stand before you today, and they said, well, when do you want to go back and preach? And I said, well, Eldon said he would stand in the gap for me if I started, and he would finish it. So I felt it was okay today to stand before you a little bit and give you a little bit of the teaching I felt like the Lord was giving to me. So I'm before you humbly saying, Lord, what is it that you're trying to teach me in this hour that I have survived to talk about? And so here I am, and I have nothing elaborate to say except God is merciful and loving, and he talks through little kids. You like that? And so I don't know if you'll see Avery today. I certainly wanted to hug her, but she was hiding from me. And I said, well, tell me about this. And she just buried her head on her dad's shoulders, and I was just to walk away, and I did. So I figured, Lord, okay, you want to say something. This is great. So here I am today, and I want to kind of come to you with that whole attitude today. And if you don't mind looking at me today in my stiff kind of way here, I would like to give you some insight that I felt like the Lord gave me to give to you. You like this? Go to John chapter 11, if you would. John 11. What am I forgetting? Anything? An offering or anything? No? Okay. I'm being ridiculous, of course. I want to talk to you about Jesus and how he feels about you. And I don't know where you're living today. I know certainly where I was living a couple of weeks ago. And I heard that some of you, how many of you came to see me when I was in the hospital? Oh, really? I do apologize. I was heavily medicated, and I had a little pee bag or something. I don't know, and it was uncomfortable, and I kept trying to pull it out. I apologize if you saw anything like that. And I'm a little bit humbled to stand before you with a bit of a right mind, I think, to share with you a little bit on the other side of this kind of way I've met the Lord in some way, that you might meet him too. I want to invite you to meet with me with Jesus in a surprise kind of way. I think the Lord is planning a surprise party today, honestly, and I think that Mark and Andrew are going to be up here praying as well as our regular prayer team, and we've seen a lot of miraculous things happen at prayer time. And we would certainly want you to put yourself in that spot where you are with Mary and Martha and Lazarus in chapter 11. Would you do that with me? Now there was a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, of the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was that Mary, who had anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. The sisters therefore sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. But when Jesus heard it, he said, the sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified by it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Jesus loved these three people who are living well below the expectations of God and what God wanted to do for these three people. And it's kind of like the time of the Passover, and it's kind of like, let's interrupt the Passover plans. It's a big holiday celebration for us. And Jesus is supposed to, be the Passover lamb that takes away the sin of the world, that the Passover originally was instituted to get Egypt, or to get the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so Jesus is standing in saying, I'm the Passover lamb. I'm the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And, here is John the Baptist recognizing Jesus, and here's Jesus coming on the scene, and here's Jesus wanting to do something more for his people than they were really willing to recognize. And here he is in this kind of setting. It's just before the Passover, and he sets this whole thing up around Passover time. And it's a different kind of scenario than you and I are thinking about Passover. It's like we're getting ready for the Lord's Supper, and and so we go through and we have people at different stations praying and handing out, juice and wine and bread and whatever, and we have people blessing and praying over people, and we have Jesus doing exceedingly more than we probably are anticipating. And here we have these three sisters, these two sisters and a third guy, Lazarus, that he raised, and Jesus loved them all. And Jesus is kind of planning this big surprise for everyone. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified in it. Now, some of you are here today, and you might be in a situation that looks, somewhat impossible, humanly speaking. It might be for the glory of God, but for you it's well beyond the glory of God, and you think, oh, God missed his opportunity to heal me, because if you look at the expectation of Mary and Martha, they said, Lord, if you'd have been here a couple days ago, Lazarus, my brother, wouldn't have died. But since you missed your cue, he's dead. And by now he's been in the grave 4 days, and he stinks to high heaven. And so in their mind, hope had been wiped out. It was gone. There was nothing left, because what they had anticipated was that Jesus would hear about this thing, hustle to Lazarus, heal him before he died, and it would have been well before he's buried, before he smelled, and they would have hid him away, and he could have been raised from the dead, but Jesus missed his cue. He got there too late. Have any of you felt that way? Like, God, where were you when I was, when I was, being touched inappropriately? Where were you when my life was coming unraveled? And here I stand today as one who is unwhole because of the expectation that I had that you would come and be my deliverer, and you didn't come on cue like I said. And it does not mean that Jesus does not have the power to wipe out the sin that can destroy your life now. He can do that. He can sort of go back and say, take that to me and watch me heal that for you. Let me do something for you that will surprise you. Meet me here in a way that you had hoped that I would come and rescue you in a certain way. Meet me here now in such a way that I can roll away the distortion around that sin that's forming an identity in you. And I'm here today. I'm here to stand in the place of Jesus and say, this is the time that Jesus had set out to do. He said, this is not for Lazarus to die. This is for him to recover supernaturally that I may be glorified. And so Jesus stuck around and stayed there a couple extra days so that he would have time to die. But Jesus' plan was to not let him die or save him from death. Jesus' plan was to raise him from the dead. And he understood what God was doing because in the middle of his walk, in the middle of understanding his own life, understanding his own purpose about going to the cross, he laid aside everything that he was considering and he thought of someone else and he put them first. Are you with me? And so we have Lazarus who Mary and Martha thought, well, if Jesus gets here in time, we can save the funeral expense and he can raise him from the dead. And that's our hope, and that's what we're hoping in. But Jesus said, I've been telling God about this. And he says, no, he's going to die, and I'm going to raise him from the dead. I'm going to do something beyond what you're thinking. And I think that God is often like that. Can I tell you that? I think that God is often like that. The thing that you're setting your hope on is perhaps lines that you have drawn for God to come. And now, because of those lines that you have drawn in your expectation, he doesn't come in time to meet those. He lets you be disappointed. And here is Lazarus. He's dead. And by the way, he stinks. And here's Mary and Martha. And we have three people. One who's living as the testimony about Jesus' resurrection, Lazarus. We have Mary and Martha. One's a worshiper, one's a servant. And they're going to fit in this kind of little scenario that's kind of natural for them. One is a worshiper and one is a worker. And one is going to bear the testimony of Jesus' resurrection life beyond his wildest dream. And I think that God kind of likes to come to you. He likes to show up for you along those lines, those expectations that you've set up, you've been disappointed, and now you're kind of making excuses for God. And you've kind of forsaken God, and you've kind of, taken God off of your miracle list, that he can do anything for anybody now, because this is where you're living now, and it's a place without hope. And you had surely thought that God would do something more hopeful for other people. But since he has not done that for you and has not met your expectations, certainly he has let the world down. And I'm here today to tell you that I think God has a different view of life. I'm here to tell you that I believe that in your loss, in your humility, in your unmet expectations, God has not really forsaken you. He's letting this sort of identity build around you. And he's going to meet you in some way that he will be glorified. He gets it, nobody else does. Mary and Martha do not get it, but he's going to lead them through this process. Are you with me? And so Jesus, he stands more ready than you are ready. Jesus stands more forgiving than you would forgive yourself. Time has lapsed, and natural things have happened where Lazarus stinks. It's not pleasant. And I'm so glad that we do funerals the way we do them. People are embalmed now, and they don't stink usually. But here's kind of a hopeless situation where the stench of flesh has already set in, where man has drawn his line past that line, and now it looks like stench is going to dominate. The stench of the flesh is going to dominate where God, you thought, would have intervened. Are you with me? And I like how Jesus deals with this. I like that he doesn't blow off what he's anticipating from the Father. He says, oh, good. And he doesn't even seem to get God's timing somewhat, because he gets there, and in his mind, he's just in time, but he's too late, and he's been dead 4 days. So you like that? And I like how God lets us cross our expectation lines, and we go without meeting him, and then he surprisingly meets us. So this is what Jesus is saying to the people. When therefore he heard that he was sick, he stayed there 2 more days longer in that place where he was. Well, Lazarus is probably going to die and be raised from the dead, so I might as well hang out here for a couple of days, let the stench set in, and raise him out of his own stench. And you think to yourself, if people really knew my hopelessness and they smelled the stench around my hopelessness, they too would give up and not hold God responsible any longer. And but here we have Lazarus. And Jesus is really tuned into Lazarus. He's tuned into Mary and Martha. He loves all 3 of them. And what's going to happen is going to surprise everybody. It's going to surprise the crowd. It's going to surprise Mary and Martha. And it's certainly going to surprise Lazarus. Should we read the story about how he calls him out? That's pretty cool, actually. Let's see. Then after he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea again. His disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. And you're going there again? What? You got a death wish? Not only are you giving up on somebody else's expectations, the example that you're walking into is not very healthy. You got a death wish? They're trying to stone you. If you show up, they're going to have reason to stone you. Do you not care? And Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? And if anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. Then he said, and after that, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go, that I may awaken him out of his sleep. My friend Lazarus is sleeping. And they think, well, he fell asleep. And the disciples therefore said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken this of his death. But they thought that he was speaking of literal sleep. Then Jesus therefore said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sake that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Lazarus is dead, and you missed it. Because I said he's asleep, you thought he was literally sleeping, but I said, no, he's dead. He stinks. And for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there, so that when I go there and I raise him from the dead, you'll see the authority of my voice and my relationship with the Father is coming to life in this situation. And you are thinking too little of what God may want you to experience. And he said, I'm glad for your sake that you missed this, because I'm going to do something beyond what you are now thinking. Now, I'm getting a little dizzy. Let me sit down here. So, look at verse 16. Thomas, therefore, who is called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let us go so that we may die with him. Now, Thomas is living in a doubtful world. Brother Tom, without a doubt. Do you know who I'm talking about? Okay. He says, well, let's go die with him. And he's being kind of smart-alecky. And his smart-alecky attitude is kind of coming through, dominating him. But Jesus wants him to see something different. And he said, well, let's go die with him. And so when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she had heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary sat in the house. Now, expectation is really, I think, important for you and I to get, is what should we set as our expectation for God's deliverance? Well, one of them says, well, I hear he's coming. I'm going out to meet him. He disappointed me, but I'm still going out because he's such a dominant figure in my life. I'm going to go see what he's doing. The other says, I'm going to just sit in the house. And I'm going to be comforted by my friends who are hanging out with me. And so Martha, therefore, said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother would not have died. Have you ever lived in that expectation that if you could only make it to a certain line that you would meet God and God would answer your prayer and you would be relieved and you would have this encounter with God to talk about and you would have that kind of set forth for other people so that they could experience God like you just experienced him? Anybody ever lived there? I love that point in life. When you're thinking, God, if you can do anything, do it for me, and I'll believe you can do this for anybody else. Are you with me? And so, and even now, I know whatever you ask God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother shall rise again. I know he stinks. He's been dead 4 days. And I know that he's passed the line where he's now stinking. And this is going to be publicly embarrassing because his stench is going to, when the tomb is opened and he comes out of it, the smell is going to stay there. It's going to penetrate. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection in the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall live forever if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? Now, one of the things that's kind of embarrassing when God moves is you have a sense of hope, and that hope kind of is a voice that calls out to you and calls you back to reality. Do you believe this? Is this what you think about me? Do I have the power to call him out of his stench from the grave? And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord. I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. And when she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying, certainly, the teacher here is calling for you. So here's her sister sitting in the house, not wanting to move because she's got comfort right there for what her expectations have now shifted to accept the death of her brother. And she's sitting there in that comfort. And then God uses her sister to call her out and say, hey, the teacher wants to see you, by the way. And he's here and he's waiting to see you. And when she heard it, she arose quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. The Jews then were with her in the house and consoling her. They saw that Mary had risen up quickly and went out, following her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came, where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, this is sister number 2 saying, you didn't meet my expectation. If you'd have been here while he was still alive, you could have saved his life. And now I'm disappointed. He's dead. He stinks. And why are you calling for me? Do you get this? And I love this hopelessness that God is ministering to us in today. Because in your mind, you've set this hope, and that hope is somewhat based on what you think God might want to do, but you really don't know, and you really don't have an idea. And then it says the Jews who were there with her in the house and consoling her, when she rose up quickly, they thought, well, there she goes to the tomb. She's going to go cry some more. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying, Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping with her, also weeping, he was deeply moved. He was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled. I don't know what you ever think about miracles that God may do to supersede your expectations. But this is certainly one of those where Jesus is like weeping, she's weeping, they're deeply moved, he's troubled in his spirit. Something's wrong here. And he's troubled in his spirit, and he's calling that out of himself. And John is writing this down. And he's somehow getting an inside view of this whole thing. And Mary and Martha are getting it. Because, Lord, if you'd have been here a couple of days ago, it wouldn't have been too late. But now it's too late. He stinks. And Jesus is troubled in his spirit. And he's troubled and said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Just show me where he's at. I don't really mind the stench that you're thinking about. Just show me. Where did you put him? Where did you put him? Where have you laid him? They said to the Lord, come and see. And it says, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. I wonder what God thinks about your hopelessness, my hopelessness. Does she wonder? Do you see that Jesus is weeping with you? You see that he's identifying with your pain, your suffering. So the Jews were saying, behold, how he loved him. Look at how he's crying. He really loved him, because look at his weeping. But some of them said, could not this man who have opened the eyes of him who was blind have kept this man also from dying? Now, what is everybody else's expectation? Lord, if you'd have made it a couple of days ago, would have been okay. And now we see you moved in your weeping. You're identifying. And what are we going to do? Jesus, therefore, verse 38, but some of them said, could not he have done something? Jesus, therefore, again being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was there a cave, and a stone was lying in front of it. And Jesus said, here it is. Are you ready? Remove the stone. What? Are we going to get a whiff of this? Our unexpected expectations has come and gone. If you had been here, you could have saved his life. And the Jews are watching you weep. They said, surely this guy that healed the blind could have saved this man from dying. And Jesus seems to not really care about the crowd. He doesn't seem to care about the expectations of Mary and Martha. He doesn't really care about his dead friend. They said, remove the stone. Martha, the sisters of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. And God doesn't seem to care about the stench. He doesn't seem to care about the 4 days that have come and gone and the unmet expectations. And Jesus said to her, did I not say to you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And so they removed the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. And I know that thou hearest me always. Because of the people standing around, I said it, that they might believe that thou didst send me. Lord, I'm praying out loud words that people observing need to hear, that you always hear me. And this is why I'm praying for your will. And thou dost always hear me. Because of the people standing around, I'm going to pray this prayer out loud. And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, here it is, Lazarus, come out. Come out of the stench. Come out of the man-made tomb. Come out of what seems to be holding you. Come out. Hear the voice of God. Come out of the stench. Now, here's the story. Are you ready? And God works kind of messy-like. And I don't know what I think of this, and I don't really care that he does like to be messy. I don't mind being messy if my wife will clean up after me. And it's pretty funny. Jim Otto is here from Texas, and he cleans up after me. And he drives me around in my turbocharged Mazda, and he drives it like an old man in a Buick. And many, therefore, of the Jews who had come to Mary and beheld what he had done believed in him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things which Jesus had done. Now, what are you going to do when you witness the power of God? You see somebody coming out of stench, coming to life. And what are you going to do to that? Are you going to report that? Are you going to bust Jesus with that? How are you going to deal with Jesus in the midst of that and yourself believing in the midst of that? Now look at verse 47. Therefore the chief priests and the Pharisees convened a council and saying, what are we doing? For this man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, all men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Now you have Jewish people wanting to be submitted to Rome for Rome's permission to be their own nation in the midst of Rome, blessing what God had kind of laid out in the Old Testament. And they said, we're going to lose respect of the Romans, and we're going to lose our place in our nation. But a certain one of them, Caiaphas, who was a high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you take into account that is expedient for you, and for one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation should not perish. Do you guys get this? I'm the high priest, and I've got a prophetic voice coming to me because of my position. And I'm telling you this, that it's a good thing that things are falling like they are, because in the midst of man's fall, God is working, and it's better for one person to die. And it's better to accept the death of this one. Now this he did not say on his own initiative, being the high priest that year. He prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. Isn't it interesting how Jesus is showing up? He wants to exceed our expectations. He's going to raise somebody from the dead that's been dead 4 days. And he's going to exceed that. But in the midst of exceeding what, God is up to in the middle of the Passover, he's going to put limits on God. And says, by the way, it's better for the nation, that one die for the whole nation. Now this he did not say on his own authority, his own initiative, being the high priest that year. He prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nations, and not for the nation only, but that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. You see, here's a guy with a position. And in his position as Caiaphas, the high priest, he gets a message from God saying, it's better that Jesus die for the whole nation. Because Jesus is out to gather into one house, one group of people. Outside of Judaism, God is working, and he's going to pull this off. Do you get that? And so God is exceeding people's expectations. So from that day on, they plan together to kill him. Now, Caiaphas is looking out for his own natural things because he wants to continue to be the high priest. From that day on, they plan together to kill him. Jesus, therefore, no longer continued to walk publicly among the Jews, but went away from there to the country near the wilderness into a city called Ephraim. And there he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up to Jerusalem out of the country before the Passover to purify themselves. Therefore, they were seeking for Jesus and were saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will not come up to the feast at all?" Now the chief priest and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. What is Jesus doing? He's fulfilling the commandment that just as Moses raised up the stick in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be raised up. And if he die, he would draw all men unto himself. That they would be gathered into one household. And the Hebrew group and the Hebrew mentality is really not getting it. But God is out doing work, obeying the Father, not concerned so much about the holidays and how he's going to meet those things, because things are going to fall into place. But he holds us in suspense as he walks among us. And he says, I love you. And it's your commitment to me that has called for me, that's brought me to this place. And I even stayed an extra 2 days so that he would die, because I knew that he would be raised from the dead, and that his death and his resurrection would bring glory and honor to me. And I want that to be a sign for all who believe, because this is something God was going to do before the Passover. And I don't know that you know this, but that God's mercy towards you extends your wildest expectation. That God's love for you, that his care for you, that his devotion to you is greater than you believe. And you invite Jesus and you don't know where to hope and where to draw lines. But he just says to us today, he said, I know this is what you thought, but this is where you find yourself. And I want you to pick things up from where I'm going to work my miracles. And I want you to know me. And so I'm here today. Maybe I don't feel even worthy to stand before you. But I think God wants me here. And I have things that, I have to, do myself in accepting God's expectation. And I'm happy to be here. Are you happy that you're here too? I'm happy that you're here. Just so that you know, He's called the weak to confound the wise, and you would be those weak people. Okay. On drugs, exposing my tubes. I did not know you were there. I don't remember you being there if you were there. I did not mean to embarrass you. But the dang thing didn't work, and I wanted to pull it out. And I knew intuitively that I should, and they let me do it eventually. And they recognized God too. And so I'm glad that you still stand by me and love me. And I want to just say I love you too. And I don't know where God will like to surprise us and where we would go from here, but I'm kind of anxious to find out at this time. How about you? Let's bring the worship band back, and Mark will come up to pray for some folks. And let's stand together in closing prayer.
are good, for you are good, for you are good to me. For you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me. For you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me.
We are God's people by his name and by his promise, not according to our own faithfulness, but because of his kind intention, he sought us when we were separated from him. And I just feel like Mark wants to share a word that I think will relate to us.
I was just thinking about Martha and Mary and how earlier in the story, Mary was the one sitting at Jesus' feet, and now she's the one hiding in the house. And I feel like maybe if there's somebody that earlier in your life you were sitting at Jesus' feet, you were the one sitting at his feet, and now you're the one hiding in the house. I feel like maybe God wants to touch you this morning, so I'd like to pray with you.
Yeah, I want to pray too. Lord, I feel like your Holy Spirit is zeroing in on our lack of expectation, that you have not let us go, that Mary and Martha did not stop you from working your glory with Lazarus, that beyond their wildest expectation, you met them where they were. You called Lazarus forth. Come forth, Lazarus, you stink. Come out of your stench into my glory and live for me. And I feel like the Lord is saying to someone here, that just resonated with someone here today, that I'm calling you out of your stench. I don't know if it's shame. I don't know if it's some sort of identity that he's put his tentacles in around you that has caused you shame. But God is saying those tentacles are not to sink into you and say that's who you are. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? I feel like the Lord is saying to you, those tentacles are not from me. They're from condemnation, and I'm there to break them off. And I'm calling you out of your stench to believe me for who I want to be with you, and you'll have no more stench. And people will accept you because of my delivering hand upon you. And Lord, I pray for that person today, these people today that you want to touch. I pray that you would give strong words of knowledge and faith as they come forth, that their own lack of belief would not stop your hand from working in great power today, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Come for prayer. God bless you all. We love you.